sources for us writer to get together, aside from Panera, where it's noisy, you know, and my house, which I tried a few times, and that didn't work well. So thank you to the library, and thank you guys for coming, many of you, for a long time, year after year. So now that we're going to start, I want to encourage you to join the Florida Writers Association if you're not a member already. Membership for adults is $55 a year. Teens are $15 a year. And you can enter the Royal Palm Literary Contest, which just closed on, I think it was May 15th. So winners will be announced at the final banquet, or excuse me, the formal banquet in October, the third week in October. Hopefully I'll be up there, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys there. I've had people in our groups win in the past, so if you entered, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. Upcoming events, we don't really have that many, but we do have Facebook pages, so you can post there. One person emailed me, and he was a regional director of the Chesapeake Writers Association in Maryland. So if you're a snowbird and live in Maryland, they're offering $100 discounts for their annual conference, and they posted it on our Facebook page. I think it was the West Boynton one, but I'll make sure it's on all of our pages. So if you live in Maryland and you're going to the annual conference, if you mention you're from Florida Writers Association or from our group, they're offering $100 discounts. Hi, Larry. So yay, that's awesome. Make sure you friend me on Facebook, or at least like our pages, so you'll know if there's a cancellation, or if you have a book release coming and you want to share your awesome news. That's the place to share it. Shameless plugs are encouraged. And if you're new to group, we have 3 rules. Bring cake, that's one. So we're covered tonight. And if you just came in, like Larry, make sure you get a piece of cake or have a glass of water, bottle of water. Seriously, the 3 rules are: respect the timer. That means when I give you the time, because we're trying to stay on time because we have a big group and we want to get everybody to share. Even if you're in the middle of a chapter, I hate to do it sometimes, but sometimes we have to stop you. Second rule is leave your negative thought outside the door. You don't have to like everything that's shared, but no self-depreciating talk in here. Keep it positive, people. The writing business is a glacial business. It's a mean industry sometimes, and we like to keep it positive. Focus on what you can do to help the writer improve. And the third rule, this is a biggie, learn to be a good listener. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I know we're spread out. It's a big room. But what I'm talking about is don't defend your writing. Here in Writers Group, sometimes you're sharing something in the middle of a story. It's already been explained. Just listen when you get the feedback. My focus usually is, how can we make your writing the strongest? So it's not about defending your work. We didn't come here to show off. We came here to improve our writing. So the feedback that you get, if you're hearing the same thing from like 5 or 6 people, well, Milton's here to show off, but if you're getting the same feedback from 5 or 6 people, you should really pay attention to that. Ultimately, it's your story. You have the final say. You decide what to do, but learn to be a good listener. Remember, when you submit things to contests or when you're trying to get an agent, you can't defend your writing and say, hey, it gets really good after page 200. You can't do any of that. So it's good to just learn to listen and receive. Okay, so tonight, we always start our groups with inspirational quotes, and tonight is about endings. Quote, ends are not bad things. They just mean that something else is about to begin. And there are many things that don't end anyway. They are just beginning again in a new way. Ends are not bad, and many ends aren't really an ending. Some things are never ending. Oh, that's by C. Joy Bell. So I always give you a list of books that I recommend. If you don't write them down quickly and I rush through them, email me. I will send you a copy of tonight's notes, and it's always there. Usually it's geared towards the group, but these are my favorites. Hooked by Les Eggerton, one of my favorites. The First 5 Pages by Noah Lukeman, a really great read. Self-Editing for Fiction Writers by Rennie Brown and Dave King. That should be one of your writer's Bibles. The Elements of Style, of course, by E.B. White and William Strunk. And On Writing by Stephen King. This was required reading before I started grad school. In addition, to give a shout out to a friend, Robert Bacon, I used his services, and he's a friend. He actually kicked me out of one of his writing groups when I first started writing in 2007, I think it was. But he's become a dear friend, and I've used him for editing. And he wrote this book, How to Write What People Will Pay to Read by Robert Bacon. If you haven't signed up for his newsletters, I highly encourage you to do that at a minimum. This book is great. It has a lot of tidbits that you will find in self-editing for fiction writers. And I have to say, sorry, Robert, I don't like the organization, but everything in here is like a real gem. And there's, lots of really good pearls of wisdom in here. I'm only on page 100 and something, but I tell you, it was hard to put down. A lot of what we talk about is in here. So shameless plug for Robert Bacon, great book, and I'm very happy with that. So tonight I'm going to just go through some of our final thoughts of things that we shared over the years. Things that I want to get you ready if you're, is especially geared towards fiction, but you can do this this advice applies to almost any genre of writing, almost. Make sure that your writing contains sensory details. Now, this works for poetry, nonfiction, fiction, especially fiction. Sensory details, we know all of them, the 5 senses: touch, taste, smell, hearing, sound, all that. Hearing, I said twice. So, hi there, welcome. Make sure that you have sensory details in every scene, even for poetry. Use your similes and metaphors, those comparisons, sparingly. Remember, simile is like an as. She was like a song. She was lovely like a song. And then metaphors was she's a wolf. So one has like an as and one is just a direct comparison. Try to avoid cliches. We talk about how Stephen King says the road to hell is paved with adverbs. Sometimes you need adverbs, especially when you're, showing speed, like Corinne quickly turned or Corinne slowly turned. Big difference. But when you can use a stronger verb in place of an adverb, like Corinne sprinted across the room versus Corinne walks quickly across the room, it's better. So since you're leaving me and I'm not going to see you for a while and I won't be able to nag you, remember, I like to play that game. I always tell my teens, you're going to have to pay me $25 for every adverb you use. So it better be important. And for every adjective that you use. Now, and I know, when we write flowery romances, there's exceptions. You'll see a lot of purple prose with heavy on the adjectives. Think in your head, you have to pay me $15 for every adjective. Is it really important? How important is it to have that extra adjective? Sometimes less is more, like saying, instead of saying a dark sanguine liquid, sometimes just saying blood is better. We're writers, we are in love with our writerly flowery words and our awesome vocabularies, but sometimes less is more. And then think in your head while you're playing this game, Corinne's going to pay me, $30 for every strong verb I use in place of an adverb or a weak adjective. So play that game with yourself. Sometimes you can highlight all the adjectives in your writing. You can actually do this online or by hand and read it without the adjectives. See if it still sounds good. Sometimes it's tighter. I love adjectives. I use them, but think about them. I always think about them when I put them in. How badly do I need this adverb? Check your manuscripts and your writing and your memoirs for point of view shifts. So, no author intrusion, hopefully, but make sure that you don't switch point of views. If you do, make sure you have a line drop to show that we are shifting points of view. Barbara Kingsolver mastered this in the Poisonwood Bible. She had 5 or 6 points of view. But what she did was each chapter said, like at the top, Sarah. So the reader knew, okay, we're in Sarah's head for this chapter. It was a very smooth transition and easy for the reader. You guys are writers, so you know all about point of view. It's easy, but even for us, sometimes when you're reading a story and all of a sudden you head swap, it takes a moment for your brain to register. Oh, okay, I'm in Dan's head now. I was in, Ella's head. Now I'm in Dan's head. So make it easy for the writer, because anything that slows down the writing or the reading, it's not good for you. Make it easy for the reader. Play with your tenses and your point of view. People sometimes in young adult like to write in present tense, which is really hard, but it's good. It's good to practice just for fun. So if you're having trouble, if you're struggling, if you're dealing with writer's block, I always say change things up. Try changing the point of view. Try changing the tense from past tense to present tense, just for fun. Like maybe just a page or a chapter, just for fun. And sometimes, you don't want to do this. Let me explain something that happened on the Florida Writers Association page on Facebook. Someone wrote in, they were having an issue. They were changing tenses and points of view. And, they said, is this okay? And we said, no, you really can't change your tense. The key is consistency. Pick one and stay with it throughout the entire manuscript. Now, sometimes you have backstory and flashbooks and this occurs, but generally don't play around with point of view or with tense shifts, because you might have to go back and edit a 300 or 400 page manuscript later. An agent might say, no, this is not working, go ahead and fix that. And then you're gonna be, in for a long ride. It's not that easy to fix. So pick one and stay with it. Same thing with like interior monologue. The 16th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style, which we as novelists follow, says that you don't have to italicize interior monologue, your inner thoughts. Be consistent. You can do it, but remember, pages and pages of italics get really annoying for the reader. Thank you, Rod, for confirming this. He actually wrote that too. But it really gets annoying. A paragraph or two italicized is okay, but when you have pages, it's really annoying to the reader. Whatever you decide to do, whether you italicize those interior thoughts or not, just be consistent throughout the whole manuscript, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And regarding interior monologue, if you are in a particular point of view throughout the whole novel, you don't need to say Corinne thought, because we know that you're in my head when you're reading, or in that person's head. So it's kind of redundant. Or I thought to myself. You don't have to have that. So these are just things to think about when you're working in the future. Write with honesty. Write fearless. It's hard because some of you guys are writing memoirs, and it's really difficult and scary because you're worried about Aunt Edna getting upset about something that's going to come out in the tell-all novel or a tell-all memoir. You have to be careful, because sometimes you think that you're painting friends and family in a positive light, and then you find out later that they did not find it that way. Be careful. Write with honesty, write hot, and then worry about it later. It takes years for a book. From the time you finish a story to the time it gets published, it could be almost 2 years. And it could pass away, I don't know. And you might, have a change of heart, or you might be able to explain it before it comes out. So just write the story that you want to and worry about the fallout later. But you have to be careful, because, people do get sued and people do get upset. And, is it worth upsetting family members? Think about that later. Check your manuscripts or check your writing for repeats. Do a search, in your computers, you can search. Look for the word smiled. I bet it comes up hundreds of times. These are things you don't think about, but, we all have phrases or beats that we get really excited about. Think about like some of your favorite things that you like to write and do a search to see if it's been repeated. One of my favorite words is the word diaphanous. And I remember one of my writer friends had actually used that word, and I was so excited listening. She came to a critique group and she used the word diaphanous, and I'm like, ooh, she is my favorite word. And then she was writing a short story, and like 3 pages later, she repeated the word, and it was diluted. It's such a beautiful word, but when you repeat things, sometimes they lose their effect. So I told her, I'm like, it was so powerful when you first said the word, and then when you said it again, it was kind of, it lost some of its punch. So check for repeats, and, especially for big fancy words. Enter contests. There are tons of poetry contests, tons of writing contests. Put yourself out there. Most of the things that you enter are free, or, $15 to $25 to enter. Be brave. Enter a contest. It doesn't hurt. Writer's Digest has fabulous competition. The competition is huge, and there's a lot of fantastic writers, but there's, things like Florida Writers Association, RPLA. There's local contests. Put yourself out there. It gets you exposure. Write in a different genre when you get stuck. I talked about, writing in a different tense, writing in a different point of view, write in a different genre. If you've never written a haiku, try that for fun, just to keep your writing fresh. Play detective and listen to people. This is one of the biggest things I can advise. We're writers. Hello, Paul. And it's good to be a good listener. We talked about that earlier. Well, when you're, at the park or at the library or, waiting in line, listen to conversations. Hear the flow. Some people talk, really fast, especially younger people than me. Some people talk slow and drawn out. There's, different dialect that you'll hear if you travel, to the South. Listen for these nuances and, make a little note in your book or, do something with your phone, set yourself a reminder. Keep it fresh. Listen. Okay, so regarding backstory, no information dumps in the beginning of a story. You can do, a sentence sometimes has a lot of power. And especially if you're writing like a trilogy, we feel the need to overwhelm the writer with backstory from the past 2 novels. Keep it sparse. Let it flow naturally. You don't have to do those information dumps right in the beginning. It just, really offends the reader sometimes. So keep it slow and maybe a sentence or 2 or a paragraph. And then as the writing evolves, let the key players come out. Let's see. Make sure that before you query an agent that your work has been professionally edited. I don't mean your high school, writing teacher. I mean by a professional author. I mean by a professional writer, someone who understands that, in novels especially, it's okay to have sentence fragments and begin with a preposition, end with a preposition. Begin with and but and all that. It's okay to do these things in novels. We break rules. Your, English literature teacher might not understand that. Make sure you have everything that you put on, out there edited. I do my best editing after I hit send. I always write that at the end of my emails. And it's true, whether it's blogging, I'm awful with my blogging. I go back and I see typos and I just cringe. But when I send something out to an agent, I make sure that's been professionally edited. Let me tell you about querying agents. We've talked about queries. We've talked about synopsises. Let's talk about agents for a moment before I wrap this up. So the story I've been working on for 3 years with grad school is, 99.999% done. And my mentor, we're doing the last round of edits. And so I got excited. And this weekend I said, okay, I'm getting ready to start the querying process for this story. So I went onto Agent Query, which is one of my favorite sites, just looking, not doing anything yet, but just looking. And I see that almost all of the agents now are asking for a query letter and a synopsis. So make sure that you have a 1 to 2 page synopsis in your arsenal ready to go. What is a synopsis? What's the difference between a query and a synopsis? Query letter, is 1 page. Was it like 250, 280 words on a page that you can squeeze in? Double-spaced, typewritten. Your query sucks up a lot of space because you have to, it's basically 2 or 3 paragraphs that you have room to talk about your book. You introduce the character, you present what their want is, what's keeping them from getting it, maybe the antagonist or what the obstacle is. And then you give, you talk about the title of your book, how many words it is, what genre it is, how they're going to sell it. They need to know, some comparisons, fans of, Time to Kill, John Grisham, whatever, might also enjoy this. Some agents like that, some agents don't, but they really want to know, how can I sell this? Who is my, audience? So sometimes it's pretty good to put that in there. You're going to talk about your writing-related experience. You have to have something. They really look for that. It's not as important to have a platform like thousands of followers if you're writing fiction, but if you're writing nonfiction and you're not, Deepak Chopra, you need a platform. You need followers because that's what they're going to be looking for. They really look for that if you're writing nonfiction. So if you have a proposal for a nonfiction book and you don't have a big fan base or a lot of followers on Instagram, Twitter, Twitter, or people that subscribe to your WordPress blog, they're going to ask you, and I mean thousands. They really expect that now. So a query letter is like a teaser. You're giving them an idea of what happens in the story, just a teaser, but you don't tell them what happens. A synopsis, it's the whole reveal. It's 1 or 2 pages of, who your hero is, who the antagonist is or what the opposition is, and then you tell them basically, you have to sum up your 3 to 4 to 500 page novel in 1 to 2 pages, but it's, the full reveal. Molly Nickel, I really love her. She has Get Published Now Academy. She does great work. She was supposed to be doing a YouTube video with the query letters. I think she was calling it Query Shark, like Janet Reed's Query Shark. And she was going to dissect my query letter, but she hasn't gotten to that yet. But she does great work with query letters and synopsises, which are evil. So she has, giving another friend a plug, she does have a synopsis tutorial. She was doing something for free for a couple of days, and I think you can find on her website, just kind of a teaser about synopsises. Check it out while it's still up there, because synopsises are evil. So if you're going to be pitching or querying an agent, make sure you have your 1 to 2 page synopsis done. Make sure that your query letter is nice and tight. And a lot of agencies, even the big agents, the really big ones won't let you send a couple of pages, but the ones that are in like good houses or people that are building their client list will ask from anywhere from 5 pages to 15 pages to 25 pages, no more. What does that mean? Your writing better be really tight. I always say, the first 5 pages are critical. If you think about it, when you go to the library, when you go to Barnes & Noble, you pick up a book and usually, you read the back cover, or it might have been recommended by a friend, but usually, you've got to hook the reader on like the first 1 or 2 pages. That book that I recommended by Noah Lukeman, the first 5 pages, he talks about how important the beginning pages are. Really, I think it's 1 to 2 pages. So make sure that you have dialogue, but don't open with dialogue. Don't open with the weather. Don't open with a dream sequence, unless you're Kafka writing about the Metamorphosis. Try to keep it really tight in the first couple pages. I mean, the whole novel should be tight, but the first 5 to 25 pages are critical, especially now. This is what I'm seeing in the industry. Thank goodness that agents are now letting us send them 5 to 25 pages. Not all of them do. Let me tell you, if your query letter is not phenomenal, you want that backup. You want to have, here's my work. Look, I'm awesome. I may not be great at query letters or synopsises, but my work is good. So that's an opportunity that you don't always get. Make sure your writing is really tight. How do we know? Bring it to the critique groups. We'll be back in the fall for the informal meetings. Bring your first opening pages. Even if it's nonfiction, your writing has to be tight. So what else should you have in your arsenal? You should have your elevator speech. If you're writing a query letter, you've got your elevator speech. Elevator speech is like the 2 to 3 sentences that basically sum up your book, your 500 and 900 page book that you've lovingly wrote. Can you explain your book in 2 to 3 sentences? We meet people every day. Tell me about your book. It happens at writers' conferences. You're sitting at a table. You don't know the woman next to you in the fancy hat is an agent. This really happened. And she asks you to describe your book. You better be able to describe it in a couple of sentences. So you never know who you're going to meet or who might know somebody that can recommend it. So can you describe your book in 2 to 3 sentences? If you can, that's good for your query letter. You really only need about 1 or 2 paragraphs to describe your query letter. Just make it tighter. 16-year-old Dorothy wanted more than anything to, get out of Kansas. And then once she was out of Kansas, she wanted more than anything to get back home. So she goes on this wild adventure with 3 crazed lunatics in search of the Wizard of Oz. It's really that easy. That was horrible. Don't quote me. But that's basically what you're doing. You're summing up, a 300 to 500 page novel in a couple sentences. You can do this. Practice with the Wizard of Oz. Practice with a book from childhood, that you can remember, just for fun. Even do it with a synopsis. That's what Molly Nickel does on her webpage. She does a lot of fairy tales. So before I sum this up, my best advice, write every day, read every day, write every day, even if it's just a sentence, even if it's just a paragraph. We all say that we don't have time, but you have time. If you have time to go on Facebook, and some of you I've seen on there, if you have time to floss, you have time to write every day. You have to nurture your craft. And to nurture your craft, to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. I don't understand writers that say I don't read. I just don't understand that. It's like you don't stop reading. My grandmother was a librarian for 75 years, and that was blasphemy. She recommended some fabulous books to me. And luckily, when I was in the graduate program, we had to read a lot of books. And reading outside my genre, because this was a new genre for me, and reading the classics, it was just a fantastic journey. I feel so enriched and so happy that I took that road. So make sure you read and write every day. And travel. When we visit Washington, D.C., or a different city, or going to the beach for the day, you hear different sounds than you normally do. I tell you, the smells in a city are so different than what we smell here. When I go up for Wilkes, I'm going up again, but whenever I go up to Wilkes, I smell these foul smells. City smells are like something between cat urine and 3-day-old fish and something sweet. There's something in New York, there's like a smell that's really strange. It's like foul and sweet at the same time. I can't pinpoint it, but you get these smells and these sounds that you don't get in South Florida. Here we have all the flora and fauna, and usually really nice smells. Sometimes there's trash burning, but we get nice smells. Or seaside smells. You don't get that in big cities. So when you travel, you're opening up your horizons, and you're exposed to so many different sounds and smells. Going on the subway in New York, and there's singers, and people singing and doing acrobats on the pole. They're doing, pole dancing. It's just so many new experiences. So break out of your comfort zone. If you can't travel out of state, just change your venue. I sit at the same table every day because that's the way I do it. I get on the treadmill, I get my ideas, and I get right to work. Sweaty, disgusting. I just go from treadmill now right to my chair, because I used to go from treadmill to shower to chair, and by the time I got into my writing chair, all the great ideas were gone that I had on the treadmill. So now I go from treadmill to chair, and I sit and I stare at the same view every day because it's, what I do. But, we get stuck in these ruts, and sometimes it's good to sit outside or go to the beach or go to the library. I can't really do myself. I can't write myself in the library. One time I went with a writer friend, and she and I sat in a room, and she was a handwriter. She wrote by hand, and just the scribble of her pencil on paper was driving me crazy. It was like, I'm so used to quiet, aside from my barking dog. I'm so used to silence. But it was funny because, that scratching of her pencil hitting the pad actually gave me writer ideas. So change your venue, continue to write, and read every day. And that's all I have. Good luck to you guys. Okay, we're out.